Going live. Hey.
Hello and good evening, everyone. This is the Property Experts panel, providing you with some expertise on property investing, property developing and service accommodation. If you do have any questions, please feel free to type in your questions as we go through this evening's session. I'm Simon Mishevich, I'm your host for this evening, but there are experts actually on this panel tonight. So why don't we go through the introductions? Bronwyn, over to you.
Hey, thanks, Simon. And hi, everybody. I'm Bronwyn Verncombe. I'm a property investor and I have a property education program as well. All of the people here today are my power team. So it's really wonderful that we've got all the experts here to help you, because as an investor, I'm not an expert. I use as many people as I possibly can who know more than I do. So that's everybody here and many more too. So over to my lettings agent, which is Jenny.
Hello there. Hi, I'm Jenny Mulholland from Southampton. I run a lettings agency which specialises in HMO management, and I'm also a portfolio landlord. And that's it. Any letting advice I can give.
And she's very good. Over to, who should we go to now?
Teresa.
Yes, hi everybody. My name's Teresa Kaczmarek. I am here representing the NRLA, the National Residential Landlord Association. So that's a newly formed organisation. It's a merger between the NLA and the RLA recently. I've got over 80,000 members, and those members are tapping into our services, which help the landlord's business with regard to advice, education, and template documentation. And more importantly, we're also lobbying on behalf of members. So giving a landlord a voice, because often the media sort of takes over and, as you probably know, depict landlords as being like the bad guys. So we ensure that we elevate the profile. So yeah, by becoming a member, you're joining our lobbying efforts. So yes, hopefully I can be of some help this evening. And I will pass the baton over to Tim.
Tim's on mute.
Thank you.
What the deliberate error. That was a beautiful handover, and you to make a complete mess. So thank you, Teresa. I apologise to everyone for making a complete mess. Right. I think I did it last month as well, actually. Right. I'm Tim Bishop. I'm a solicitor. My firm is Benalec and Bishop, and we've got about 65 staff, and we cover everything you'd expect us to cover. We particularly have a number of specialist teams, including a property investor team and a lease extension team. I'm also a landlord myself. I've got an HMO, and I've done a commercial conversion, which I'm now running as 6 service accommodation flats. So we're the solicitors who really understand property investors. So welcome everybody, and over to the wonderful Paul Hilliard from the excellent LNPG.
Thank you, Tim. Good evening, everyone. My name's Paul Hilliard. I'm a portfolio landlord in the West Midlands. I've got everything from single buy-to-lets, HMOs, service accommodation, and I've even tried rent-to-rent and a few commercial to resi conversions. So if you ever need any advice on that, give me a shout. As regards LNPG, if you've not heard of us, we've been around since 2011, but a lot has certainly happened since then. And members can now save their money on everything from kitchens, bathrooms, boilers, building materials, blinds, light bulbs, and everything in between. Every landlord knows that our business costs are going through the roof, especially in this time, and certainly not in proportion to our income. So because we're price sensitive, you have to be, but we're not. But you shouldn't compromise on your quality at the same time, just to save a few pounds in the short term. It's often a decision you come to regret. And the advantage of the LNPG membership is that it brings landlords together to give you great quality products at a great price. So if you need to learn more about us, go onto our website, www.lnpg.co.uk, or give us a call on 01455 234499. Over to Simon Hodgson.
Okay. Thanks very much. Okay, yeah, so hello everybody. My name's Simon Hodgson. I'm a specialist mortgage broker. I work with a number of high profile investors within the investing community within the UK. I've been involved in property since the early noughties. I kind of back then did what a lot of us did. I went out, I'd heard of buy-to-let. I went and found a residential broker, asked them to organise a buy-to-let mortgage for me. They had no idea what they were doing. So I told them which lenders to go to, which product they should give to me. They then charged me for the advice I gave to them, which they gave back to me, etc., etc. And it then turned out that being a broker was a kind of where I was destined to be. So I still do lots of property, have done loads. And really, yeah, the idea is that I'm here and I'm able to help everybody in terms of finding the right finance package for the strategy that you do. So I've done and tried every strategy that there is out there. I've done some of the property mentoring programs, especially over 12 months with Simon Zucci. So yeah, that's kind of where I come in, and really I'm dialed into the market in terms of how funding is ready and out there for us as investors. I think we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight, how that can help you, and how we all see the market, where the market is. Lockdown has finished, yes, or lockdown is kind of phased, I should say. However, it's not necessarily all guns blazing out there, and we need to be really careful how we kind of take these next steps. Right, yeah, over to Simon M.
Well, back to me. Thank you ever so much, guys. It's been an interesting week full of 3 C's. The 3 C's I've written down here is confusion, clarity, and contradiction. I am not, of course, talking about Boris Johnson's midweek speak last week, and I did talk about the lockdown easing. I'm simply talking about where do you get your haircuts? So for more men sporting their hairs with their wives, cutting those, women are now coming multitasking. One of the things that we should pick off the bat is I will be shielding the questions here and then asking those questions. But if you're listening at home, please make sure that you do ask those questions in the chat box, and I will be keeping an eye out on those questions as well. So why don't we make a start? But before we do talk about that, Jenny, you opened up with the comment earlier when we had a conversation about the lockdown is easing from a letting agent's perspective. So why don't you talk about your business and how things have now started to reopen? Jenny, you're on mute, just so you know.
But not in Wales, of course. Don't forget, Wales and Scotland are slightly different.
Thank you.
Oh, of course, yes.
Yeah.
So here in Hampshire,
In sunny Hampshire,
the lockdown was eased. Estate agents and letting agents now allowed to go out and do property related business. So that might be dressing rooms, videoing for marketing purposes, photographs, carrying out personal face-to-face viewings. There's some caveats around that, and moving people in or out of properties. So the whole spectrum of what we do is now allowed with a few little extra precautions. So if we're in a house with somebody, it needs to be the least number of people in the property. So if there's a couple, they need to be already together in lockdown. So it's a couple who are together, not individual people. Otherwise, just one person in the house, the other needs to wait outside. Ideally, if it's an empty house, we go inside, open all the windows, open the doors so people don't need to touch surfaces. Open windows, of course, is very good for not confining the virus, and then let the people look around on their own. Now, it's not always possible to do that. If people are in the house, we do a lot of HMO work. We ask the other tenants to stay in their rooms or go outside. It's been lovely weather, so outside has been preferred. And then we take one person in with a face mask. We sanitize hands on the way in and on the way out, touch as little as we possibly can, do the viewing as quickly as we can, and really almost stand back in the room and let the person do their own look around. Leaving the property, either discarding the masks and the gloves into the rubbish bin or re-sanitizing hands as we leave the property. So those few sensible extra precautions, don't take them in your car with you. Often we're doing 2 or 3 viewings. Might say, hop in the car, I'll take you to the next one. Not allowed to do that. Now, if it turns out that is the only practical option, have all the windows open in the car, keep your face masks on in the car. It's just common sense, but we can now do a full range of what we do. What we're still doing though, and I think it's the very sensible thing, and I think it's what will happen, is it's the chat on the telephone first, then it's the videos, and then once we've established that there is a, you know, not tire kicking about this, then we can go to the physical viewing. And that has happened this week, and it's really opened up very quickly.
Just a quick question that's coming from a YouTube listener, from Raj, who's asked the question, which I'll hand over to you, Jenny, and to Bronwyn, if that's okay. I'm looking to invest in Southampton. Are you able to suggest which is the right locations to invest in?
Great.
Right, well, yeah, we know our hometown very well, so I'm sure we could help. Obviously, it's personal to you. What is that exactly you're looking to invest in? Are you looking to get HMOs, or are you looking to do something else, SA, commercial conversions, whatever it is? It will depend on what you're looking at. So it's probably a question you need to ask us offline, so that we can get a bit more detail and help you. And I'm sure between Bronwyn and I, we can certainly point you in the right direction. Southampton's still a very good place to be looking. It's a busy university town, and there are plenty of opportunities here, as well as Portsmouth actually as well.
Yes, I mean, Southampton is great. We've got two hospitals, two or three hospitals there. We've got 2 universities. It's huge. So Southampton, from an investing area, has really high demand. It has high employment and is a great place to invest. So really the first question you should ask yourself is, what's your strategy? Just as Jenny said, how do you make sure that you've got the opportunity to consider your tenant type as well? So are you single lets? Are you looking for families? Where do families want to live? Where are the bus routes? It's really important to look at transport, parking. You've got to put yourself in the shoes of your investor and think about where the opportunities are. So yeah, more than happy to take that offline, book a chat with me, and we can help you from there.
One thing I did pick up, thank you, Bronwyn, for that, and Jenny. One thing I did pick up is with COVID-19, there has, of course, been more time with the family at home. So my question to Tim personally, this is a question. Do you think there's going to be a baby boom or high divorce rates going in after this?
I think the answer is yes on both of those. Certainly divorce rates traditionally after recessions tend to go up. People get running out of cash, etc. But of course, in this one, you've also had people put together. It's always interesting with divorce that normally the 2 most busy times of the year are September and January. And one of the reasons for that is that people are crammed together over Christmas or holiday. They think they need more time together, whereas sometimes if a couple's falling apart, it's actually the last thing they need. So yeah, we're already noticing an increase. I think I read some stats about 7 or 8% is perhaps the expected increase. Yep, so I expect both.
Wow, interesting. Okay, so question over to Paul, if you don't mind. It was talking about HMOs and self-contained units, let's call it that. Do you think HMOs are a thing of the past and to be replaced by self-contained units because of COVID-19 and potential other viruses that we might face in the future?
Wow, interesting question on the basis that I am heavily HMO dependent. I would say HMO is the way to go. I've not thought of self-containment. The main issue with that is that if you're letting to a HMO tenant, then their budget is somewhat limited and they expect everything self-contained as regards billing, etc. Therefore, if you make it self-contained, that's an extra billing that you will pick up, because obviously the local council will go, thank you very much, we'll charge you, is it band A, council tax, which is anywhere between £800 and £1,000. So it's not something I would envisage doing personally. I think the HMOs, if you've got good sized HMOs, they will still be very valid for the future, because you're going to find more and more people are going to be working, so they working from home and therefore needing a slightly bigger operation, operational base. Definitely HMOs are the way to go. And the other side of the coin is that you've got to stand out from the crowd. So if you up-spec your HMOs, A, you can get more money, but B, they should rent quicker.
Okay.
Yeah. I'd agree with that. I think if I can just add that I think more people will be thinking about the costs, you know, so maybe they've lost their job and maybe they can't afford the flat that they're staying in now. They're probably happier to share and move to an HMO type of environment. It can be really supportive for people on their own, but also a lot cheaper because they're not having to pay the bills. So I think there's going to be quite a demand in HMOs going forward. I certainly don't see any issues with an HMO environment, especially if you stand out from the crowd, because, you know, if you provide somewhere really, really lovely with good communal areas, particularly as people need their space to work from. So, yeah.
Just keeping on that subject, Jenny and Teresa, if you don't mind, what's your views in terms of health and safety and COVID-19 in regards to tenants? What should landlords be doing to promote good health, hygiene? What's your thoughts?
Well, it's a bit like what the government's doing. They keep repeating the message: wash your hands, social distancing, that kind of thing. With tenants in an HMO, it is their home. They do want to relax, and maybe they don't want to clean up after they've just had their meal because they want to sit in front of a movie or whatever it is. But what they're not thinking about is actually there might be 2 or 3 other tenants who want to use the kitchen. And I feel that I almost feel that we're telling tenants far too often that they need to be cleaning up behind themselves, being much more respectful of other people's usage of the same shared spaces. And it's the hygiene thing. We're not saying it's dirty. What we're saying is the requirements are much higher now to have surfaces to be wiped down with disinfectant and that kind of thing. And it doesn't necessarily, it's your home, and it's not, you don't think that you need to do that in your home. You think of that more in public spaces, but actually the kitchen particularly and bathrooms of the HMO is a public space. And we just keep repeating that message to our tenants to be mindful of others using the shared facilities. And going back to what Bronwyn was saying earlier, I think with HMOs, those HMOs that have got the bigger rooms where people can have desks and a little bit more space, and the ones where there are multiple bathrooms and preferably en suites, I think those will be the ones that will definitely get let first. People don't want to live in a rabbit hutch, especially if they need then to work at home as well.
Yeah, Teresa.
Yeah, I think I agree with all those good comments there from Jenny. Just would add that it's really important to keep communication up with your tenants at this time, not to go overboard so that you're not leaving them to their quiet enjoyment. We don't want to be harassing our tenants, but still to keep up the communication with regard to like the maintenance of the property. So if that's to be done virtually, you can get the tenants to walk around virtually so you can see that, are there any issues that need to be addressed? Also at that time, you can just remind them about the the hygiene guidelines as well. You can ask them to put up a poster, just to remind themselves about the hygiene guidelines. But as Jenny said, it's tricky in HMOs, specifically when other tenants aren't on board with the hygiene. So I'm sure with households like that, there's probably more interaction with the landlord trying to sort out these issues.
Moving on to a slightly different subject, which is pouring in from our YouTube listeners, is about valuations. And Simon, over to you on this one. What's your thoughts on property valuations going forwards? Are we seeing that valuers from banks are purposely downgrading property values?
Well, yeah, obviously that is one of the burning questions. Well, we've already seen lenders reduce their loan to values. So the lenders have already kind of, if you like, perceived that they don't really know exactly where the property prices are going over the lockdown. So their only line of defence is to reduce loan to values, which then takes a bit of pressure off the valuer to then feel that they actually have to be overly negative about the position. So the challenge for valuers has been that there have been reasonably few transactions taking place. Most valuers not going out to site, so therefore they're doing desktop valuations. Where valuations have taken place where they have been desktop, most of them, I'd say, a good portion of them have been on point and around pre-lockdown prices. So certainly using desktop as a model has meant that the market hasn't necessarily dipped. I had a little independent behind the scenes poll with some valuers over the last sort of 7 days, really to try and get an idea of where things are. And also just to make sure that cases as they're put forward are positioned correctly, so that client expectation and lender expectation kind of meets in a nice place and we kind of get deals to work. Now, what I have had conversations back were around HMOs specifically, where HMO valuations are now going to be taking place as of this week and moving forward. If you're having it done on a commercial basis, they raise a reasonable chance, certainly in and around the south, the southeast, southwest, moving up to Birmingham or what have you, that the valuations aren't really going to change that much at this moment in time. Now, that is subject to change because, of course, as transactional volume increases, we might see that it takes us in a particular direction. But through that narrow band of transactional transactions that have taken place, it doesn't look like they've really changed that much, to be fair. And bricks and mortar, I think the highest I heard was around about 5% possibly. So yeah, really quite positive news. And I would welcome feedback if anyone on the call tonight has had conversations with their local valuer that either supports that or doesn't support that, because we would love to share as much as we can, within the group.
I mean, there's one thing to say the valuer is obviously giving a valuation to the property, but Tim, are you finding that there are people in a deal that's about to complete, but then the buyer all of a sudden says, well, actually, I'm going to decrease my price, take it or leave it?
I think it's been a little bit of that. Gazumping, I suppose, in a sense, it's almost reverse gazumping, has always been with us, I guess. Not on a huge level yet, but it's very early days. We've only been back on in terms of selling property on a more normal level for 3 or 4 days now. So I think it's very, very early days. I think there are so many uncertainties. Clearly, there's more interest in the market. I've just checked some figures. We had, I think, one of my guys had, 7 inquiries about a purchase, 1 sale, a couple of equity releases today. So that's a massive increase in what he was getting last week. Other members of the team do similar sort of figures. So clearly there is action, but I simply think that we're going through such an enormous change. I don't think it's easy to predict when prices will change, if they will change, how they will change. It's simply too early. The Economist, for example, was describing the return to a 90% economy on the basis you're going to lose 10% of the economy. Hasn't really happened yet. The big companies haven't gone, the small companies haven't gone. This is going to happen in 3 or 4 months' time. So I think we don't think this is the end. This is perhaps the end of the beginning. But I think the big change, if there is going to be on prices and people's habits, has not arrived yet.
Okay. It's always good to be part of this expert panel because we do go through the detail with a fine-tooth comb. Talking of combs, Paul Hilliard, I can see you combed your hair this week, so that's good to see. Here's a question from Andy. Here's one for you that talks about the opportunity of service accommodation holiday lets. Do you think because people will not want to travel on a plane that we might see that uptake coming forwards?
Absolutely. UK holiday are going to be the destination of choice and preference this year, and maybe even next, depending on what happens with the so-called self-isolation when you return. If you heard Michael O'Leary this morning, who was saying very clearly, you don't have to bother, although he did backtrack a bit and say, well, yeah, you'll get away with it. But, I think it's definitely, if you've got the properties in the right locations, then, yeah, southwest, northwest, anywhere coastal or thereabouts should be great for service accommodation. The one thing that I think is still valid is that I'm fairly certain that the companies are on lockdown until the end of the month. That's Airbnb and Booking.com. So just be wary that if you do try, I know I was able to book in September recently, but if you do go on and try to book something before the end of the month, I think you won't be able to achieve it. Somebody else may be able to correct me on that. But yeah, service accommodation, even if you haven't got holiday lets, you're going to find contractors are going to want to stay, when they're working, stay locally, because they will want to get the jobs finished fairly quickly, because they'll be up against tight deadlines. So
Okay.
that's a plus.
And in regards to you, Bronwyn, are you seeing anything in terms of your change of strategy for property investing because of COVID? Are you looking at more holiday lets, maybe?
Well, yeah, just picking up on the point about holiday lets. I have 2 here in the village, including my home. Oh, and I'm just going to pin my video. I've just had a booking, so it was through Airbnb, but they contacted my agent, the lady in the village that manages them. They contacted her and they negotiated directly with her. They're paying, they're going to be taking over the property for 4 months because their house is going to be renovated, and they've got a huge refurb happening, and they've got a family with a dog. They want somewhere long term, but it's long term, short term, so it's great. So we've negotiated that one, and the same for the other property we've got. I've got some contractors coming down for I think 4 weeks. We've actually been able to let our holiday lets pretty well, actually. It's amazing that people do need places to stay that isn't home. They're coming down, to do a particular contract, or they're moving house, or they've sold their house and their other house has fallen through. I can see that demand is going to be fine from people that I know with holiday lets or serviced accommodation. They're also picking up business from hospitals, doctors and nurses who want to self-isolate away from their families, or have somewhere to stay during the week. So yeah, I haven't seen too many issues. Obviously, we've not been as busy, but we have been able to, adapt for sure.
And that's always an interesting time. I did pick up on, in terms of people's appetite to sell property. Staying with you, Bronwyn, and then going over to you, Tim. Do you think it now is the time to buy or sell property? So is it a buyer's market or is it a seller's market right now?
Well, it's both, really. It's I can see there's opportunity in many parts. From what I'm hearing and from what I'm seeing on Rightmove, people putting their houses on the market, even during lockdown, taking photographs and getting listings. There are estate agents out there who've been actually very busy because they can adapt and work from home. So the smaller ones. So people have to move. People are moving and people are changing jobs. A lot of people are looking at where they might like to live, having been locked down for so many months in a wherever they might be. They might be thinking, is this the place we want to stay for the future? I know it sounds funny, but people are saying, maybe I should just change my whole outlook. I want to live somewhere else. I don't want to live here, or I want to work somewhere else. I don't want to work or go back to this job that I had. So I think there's opportunity everywhere. Some people will have to sell, which will be unfortunate, and they will be motivated. Other landlords, I think, will be thinking, oh, can't be bothered anymore. So maybe they'll be either ready to rent, so do a purchase lease option, rent their property to somebody else, or indeed do a deal with their whole portfolio. So yeah, there's lots of opportunity, and I think now's the time to be really focusing on what you want to be doing, whether you're an investor now, whether you want to be an investor in the future. Start learning and start thinking and considering different strategies. I've got guest houses. They've changed. I'm housing street homeless now in one of them that was booking.com. I'm making more money from that, but actually working harder for it. But actually we may continue that strategy. It's a great win-win when you can make it work well. So there's so much you can do. Yeah.
So moving on to something else, and now last week I did say, and it was a bit of a warning, but this person's Anil is already on a yellow card, asking a tax question. You know, this is not a tax forum. I refuse to answer any tax-related questions, but because I'm a sympathizer in this regard, I will answer this one. It does talk about what are the tax ramifications because of COVID-19. And my view is there are a lot of articles going around in terms of, will income tax go up? Will VAT go up? Will stamp duty, land tax go up or down? And to be fair, I think when Boris Johnson doesn't know if you should go to work or not go to work, should you have relatives staying with you or have complete strangers, not quite sure that there's any clarity at all about tax. So I think right now, I would say that we just need to brace ourselves. Will tax go up? Yes. Which one? Who knows? I don't think anyone is in a real position to say, this is my prediction and this will come out. I appreciate that there's lots of tabloids now doing those, but be careful with what you read, because you may make a decision based on factually incorrect information, and then you may come a blunder later on. So please, at this point in time, wait for this whole thing to go away. We will see a budget announcement rather swiftly around about August, September, I would have thought, just to deal with what's going on. But this country is still spending billions of pounds to supporting the economy, to support people that need help. So right now, I would say just be a bit careful in terms of what decisions you might choose to make. Talking of tax, I'm going to deflect this nicely onto Tim. And the reason for that is because I read the question from GH Property, and I have to be honest, I kind of got lost. So if I read it, I'm rather hoping that I can push that responsibility firmly on Tim and I look less of an idiot. So let's start with a question.
You mean that I look a bigger idiot than you do? Fine, I'm happy with that.
It's a good deflection. That's why, yeah, absolutely, yeah. So let's start the question which says, Adam owns property A, which is, by the way, there is an exam paper after this one for you. So Adam owns property A, which he currently is his main residence. Adam rents out property A and currently does not want to sell. Adam buys property B to live in and to become his main residence. I'm hoping you're still following on this one. In a few years' time, Adam decides to sell property B and replace it by buying property C at the same time. When Adam buys property C, will he pay any stamp duty and at what rate?
Pass. To be honest, I'm not. I would pass it to my local friendly tax accountant, and there happens to be one in the room, I think.
Yeah, I have to be honest. When I read it, I thought, well, there's a replacement, there's a transaction, there's a sale. Normally, if you're buying with their consideration, which is either a transfer or a transfer or swapping houses, or whatever this might be, there's definitely an SDLT. Which rate? It really does depend. So Tim didn't bail me out. I shall note that down for later on.
Perhaps I can add, in terms of SDLT, I think it's a useful point. Once upon a time, SDLT was stamp duty was relatively straightforward, and there weren't many exemptions. But now, partly because it's so much more expensive, I think you have to be far more careful. We regularly check with accountants and with specialists on SDLT questions. So I think solicitors who sometimes think they know all about SDLT sometimes no longer do so. Things have changed hugely in the last 10 years. And I think quite often people end up paying a lot more than they should do, or actually simply get it wrong and then have the taxman come after them. So I think stamp duty was simple once, is now actually genuinely complex. And in that kind of circumstance, I would make sure I got a specialist tax advisor to answer the question.
Yeah. Let's go over to Simon, who's been pretty quiet. So make sure that we give him a nudge. So the question for you, my friend, is payment holidays. And that's a question that rose from last week. Will payment holidays, and I'm going to throw another spanner in the works, which is bounce back loans. So if someone's going to be looking at payment holidays or the bounce back loan, which one is going to have the most negative effect on your credit rating?
I think almost certainly unequivocally, a payment holiday is going to have the most impact on your credit file. It's only likely to be relatively short term. So what's happening is that lenders are all ready. So if they've got a new case in, either for a remortgage or a purchase, certainly one of the questions that will be asked of me, has this person, or have any of the mortgages that this person holds, had a mortgage holiday? And if so, are they still on the mortgage holiday? Some lenders are looking for either 3 clear months worth of payments. Some are asking for 6. However, key piece of advice coming out here, not every lender will do this, and it takes some real persistence in order to get a lender to do this, but you can try this, okay? If you've taken a payment holiday, okay, they've agreed to give you a payment holiday, and the chances are that they have marked in your credit file a U for unspecified, which will alert most new lenders as to what's happened. If you go back to your lender that you took the payment holiday from, pay back the money that you would have paid for that mortgage payment and any previous month's mortgage holidays. So you now have not effectively taken the mortgage holiday. You've paid all the money back. It has not been added to your loan balance. And you ask, or you relatively firmly insist, that they then update your credit file to show that you made the payments on time in that specific month, because you were not correctly advised by them that by taking the payment holiday could have a negative impact on your credit file. And they have no defense for this, because they are meant to have informed you of how a payment holiday works, whether it can affect your credit file, and whether it will affect your future borrowing. Now, most lenders are giving payment holidays for the first time because they've never normally done it on some of these buy-to-let lenders. So they didn't have the process there. So there's a reasonable chance that they can be coerced or persuaded or made to see the light, if you like, that they can reverse that. Now, it also makes things an awful lot easier for you if and I appreciate most people wouldn't have done this, but hopefully some people did. If not, if you have any future conversations and communications with your lender, please make sure you do this. Make a note of the date, the time, and the person you spoke to. Not because you want to get put back in touch with that person, but when you go back to question the advice that was given to you, okay, if you imagine these lenders are handling thousands of calls a day, all being recorded, it's a nightmare if you tell them that one day back in March or April, I phoned you up to ask for a payment holiday. They're kind of going, did you? Right, let us come back to you. I've now got to deploy some staff power to go and listen to hundreds of messages to try and pick up when that might have happened. But if you can tell them the day that you made the phone call, the time that you made the phone call to the nearest minute, and the person you spoke to, it makes the job of finding that phone call and listening to the contents of it far easier and far quicker to take place, which then helps you get some kind of resolve with the lender. That said, if you absolutely have to have a payment holiday, you can't pay that money back, okay, take it, do it. And as long as you don't need to have any new or future borrowing in the next 3 to 6 months, you're probably going to be okay. There will still be some hangovers in terms of some lenders kind of going, well, we can see you had a payment holiday. We're not particularly keen in giving you either an 80% or an 85% loan to value product, but we might be happier giving you a lower loan to value because they perceive that perhaps there's a bit of risk there. Which leads nicely on to, and I've talked for a long time, I appreciate that, bounce back loans. Now, bounce back loans aren't anything like as toxic to your credit file. I've only seen one example thus far, and that is where I had a borrower who owned one property in an SPV. So there were no other properties in this limited company. And there, at that point, the lender wanted to understand if a bounce back loan had been taken, for how much, and what the future payments might be, so they could take that into account when assessing the affordability of that lending. But if you've got more, a number of mortgages in a limited company, it's not uncommon for a limited company to take on borrowing, and therefore the cost of the loan is spread across multiple properties, and therefore doesn't take a whole heap of difference. If you can, I would suggest if you had to take a payment holiday because you absolutely had to, but you think you qualify for a bounce back loan, why not try getting a bounce back loan and then paying back the money from your payment holiday and trying to repay your credit file. As a piece of advice as well. Does that cover all the questions nicely, Simon?
I think it does. I think it does. And I really do appreciate that compared to Tim, who completely avoided it and put me on the spot. So really do appreciate that. Thank you ever so much. You're in the good books. Aranda said, in terms of who is responsible, well, actually, no, Aranda didn't ask that question. Aranda says, my tenant has not paid in the last 2 months, has now become unemployed. What do I do? So Teresa, let's go to you and then straight over to Jenny.
Right, yes, that's a tricky situation. I think it's good to understand, you know, has the tenant tapped into any of the benefits that they can tap into? So if they're unemployed, have they applied for universal credit? Yeah, so it's establishing that to start with. And then it's for them to understand that any rent that's not paid will be paid later on. So they're in rent arrears. So just try and work out some sort of payment plan with them so that you can, because you don't want to put too much pressure on them so that, you know, you stop communication. You just, you know, you want to keep things amicable and then try to work with your tenant to get the best solution. So if that's the case that they can only pay a little bit, then take that, you know, just a little bit. But it's important that any conversations that you have with them, any communications that you have with them, that you do basically record it all, because, you know, you need to, you know, to get evidence for, you know, for the efforts that you've put in to try and resolve the situation. In the unfortunate case that, you know, it may end up with repossessing the property, if that's going to be done any speed whatsoever, because that's a really slow process at the moment. It's come to a full stop. But yeah, I don't think I can add any more to that at the moment.
Jenny? Jenny, you there?
Maybe the Wi-Fi signal's gone.
Oh, okay. We might need to come back to Jenny then. We'll express that one. Moving over, as a professional as I am, let's move over to Paul Hilliard. Obviously, we want to have everything reopened. We've now got builders and traders coming into our property. Of course, we've had to kick out the family because they're not allowed in, but we can bring in the tradespeople. From LMPG's perspective, are you still seeing that the trade depots are still opening up, or are they limiting what they're going to be supplying?
The vast majority of trade depots are open up, but it's very much a click and collect basis. So you must have an account. If you haven't and you're an LMPG member, we can sort that for you. But if you've got an account, then you can give them a call or email them and make arrangements. The one thing that you will struggle on at the moment is plaster and plasterboards, because there's just a complete scarcity in the market, and you're paying between £8 and £10 a bag when for something that was less than £5 before the shutdown. That's a pure supply and demand issue, with mainly because of British Gypsum having to close down for however many weeks during the early start of the COVID crisis. As regards other companies, if you go onto the LMPG website, we give you instructions, if you remember, of how to order. There were specific changes being made with magnets to ensure that your plans and drawings are produced on an efficient basis. So products are there. We heard today our wall panel supplier is struggling to get laminate from the continent at the moment. So it's a case of, double check either with us or with our suppliers, and they will advise you of any issues. But always check on the website as how to go about ordering the placing your order.
And talking about pricing, Paul, just keeping on that very point, are you expecting that prices will start creeping up because of raw materials aren't there to be there to manufacture these products?
That's right. I think there's an issue as regards raw materials, an issue as regards the supply line, and obviously priority has been essential items, which is understandable. But with the market being opened up in the past week or so, it's very much trying to be business as usual. but there are certain limitations, and we are seeing prices going up. But bear in mind that some magnet, for example, prices are fixed. So are Wolsey prices. So yeah, there's no worries there. The juice and contract, what they've undertaken is that where the prices do go up because of supply and demands, they all ensure that we are competitively priced based on similar sized businesses as ourselves. So we will still be getting the best value in the market for our members.
I mean, Andy Churchill just said something on that about British Gypsums owned by Saint-Gobain, the French company. The supply of plaster products here is being given by the French. Would you agree with that?
I don't know if it's necessarily given by the French. I mean, don't forget Saint-Gobain also owned Jewson, but because of the competition authority, they're not allowed to make preference to Jewson. So they're in the same ballpark as everybody else. So just because they're part of the same group doesn't mean that they can get quicker supplies. British Gypsum have got to be fair and competitive. As regards the French leading, I don't think it is a case of that. I think it's more a case of supply and demand. Everyone wants plaster at the moment, and there are limits as to what you can order from certain places. If you're new to someone, I think they were saying maximum 5 bags. Other companies are saying we can supply 50. It's one of those things. But we heard today someone being charged £10 for a bag of plaster. Horrendous.
I mean, I'll tell you what's horrendous. I agree with the pricing going up, but I would pay £25 for a Costa coffee right now. So let's move on from that. I need my caffeine. Talk about something a bit different is commercial properties. Is commercial properties a good investment given COVID-19? Let's have Simon and Bronwyn on this one.
Right. Okay.
Simon.
Of the conversations that I've had with valuers, that was probably the one area and item where they felt there was the most ambiguity in terms of where the high street's not out to play. Certainly, fringe areas along the high street, certainly valuations there are going to drop because they're based on a yield basis. It's hard to predict how that yield is going to continue over the next trading year. So that can only affect things, I'd suggest. However, anyone who's new to investing perhaps won't have heard this, but there's something called the strength of covenant, which nicely ties into your Costa coffee there, Simon. If you have a building and it's rented out by a local coffee company, one-man band, it might be worth, for argument's sake, 100,000. But if you've got a 10 or a 15-year lease for Costa coffee in that particular place, even through this lockdown, there's not a lot they can do to wriggle out of that contract. You could probably see, or can possibly see, that property value at maybe twice as much, sometimes more. So a strength of covenant can have an absolutely massive benefit. And I've got one investor who that is his strategy. He takes properties and had or sort of leased them out to celebrity chefs. Now, I'm not sure that's going to be quite as easy to do these days, particularly. However, they had done just that. They had nearly tripled the value of their property whilst virtually spending not a lot on it. So I think it's one of those things. If you really know what you're doing in commercial, you can still make money at it. But if it's something that you're new to, definitely treat with a definite air of caution, because if you lose a tenant now, typically even pre-lockdown, finding a new tenant typically could be 6 to a 9 month period before you get a new tenant if you're not got prime location. And that's only going to take longer, to be fair.
That's good. Now, for everyone listening into this session, if you do find this webinar useful, interesting, debatable, please do give it a like. It really does help us share this content out with someone else in terms of videos in the future. And also, don't forget to press the subscribe channel. I know that some people have been asking about limited companies and should I use a limited company for tax purposes. There are plenty of videos on this channel talking about that, so I won't talk too much about that. I think Tim and I had a discussion about using limited companies for de-risking your model. If something goes wrong, then you want to make sure litigation is not going to affect your personal property. So limited companies could be useful for that. But from a tax perspective, I would say you do need a sit down conversation. Please don't come onto YouTube and think that there's going to be a great tax strategy for you personally. I can give you some general guidance, but honestly, please don't take it just on face value. Don't go on Facebook and expect an answer from their threads, because again, someone may give you some tax advice that's relevant to them. And because they focus on it so much, that they might say this should be used by you and try and influence your decisions, which could be a costly error. So please don't listen to anyone without sitting down and properly going through your finances. One thing I do want to kind of announce here is we regularly close down limited companies for people because they think that they're going to be investing for the long term in limited companies, but they want to give up their job. My view is, well, if you're going to give up your job in 2-3 years' time, then you may as well keep your properties in your personal names, pay that little bit extra tax, but you'll pay, generally speaking, less buy-to-let interest in your personal name than you would a limited company. And additionally, you don't have the additional accountancy fees and all the director responsibilities. So just a word of caution about limited companies. And should you do it from a tax perspective, it is highly debatable, and it really does depend on not just your situation, but your families as well. So I won't go into too much more than that across the pond. So in terms of, here's a question that I want to just kind of ask everyone. Obviously, there are government support schemes out there. I'm going to throw open to the expert panels. So there's been things like the deferment of VAT. There's the bounce back loans. There's the furlough scheme for employees. Let's go around the table. What things have you been doing actively getting support from the government? Jenny, let's start with you, good self.
Well, today I got a bounce back loan. It was really easy. My bank manager rang me up and said, do you need any money? No, not really. Has your business been affected by the coronavirus? Yes, I've got one member of staff furloughed. You can use this for any reason. And I said, well, there might be opportunities in property. Right, when we're all allowed, this was, the last weekend we were talking. I said, so could I use it to maybe buy another property? And she said, you can use it for anything you like, as long as it's not to repay an existing loan. So it's very simple. Why don't you apply? So I did. I applied last evening. Today there was a link sent through to me to put a little bit more information on it. I did that at about 5 o'clock today because I've been busy most of the day. And before we came on this webinar, my loan has been approved.
Wow.
It doesn't affect my credit rating. It's for 6 years. First year, no repayments, no interest. Government pays the interest. And then it's 2.5% for the remaining 5 years. Yeah. Why would you not have money that cheap? If it's on a plate, it was easy to get. I've not used any of the other schemes, but I have highly recommended them to some of our tenants, getting into the universal credit. Obviously, no, I have used the scheme because I've got one of my employees furloughed. So yes, of course, I've used that. Right. But I have been talking to our tenants in particular who are finding it difficult to get the support. Some of them who are employed, it's relatively easy.
Oh, we've lost.
Oh dear.
Okay, Jenny might just disappear for a short period of time. Who else is you?
So I can talk particularly if we flip it here to more of the grants. So that's free money. That isn't a loan. And if you've got a business, that's paying business rates, for example, I have a holiday let in Winchester, and I have a couple of some guest houses. And I've got one guest house that's empty at the moment, and it's got one person living there because it's where she was and that's where she needs to stay. So on that basis, we were emailed, would we like to apply for a grant given that we pay business rates? And we applied, and £10,000. We applied, I think 3 days later, the money was straight into the bank account, which is tremendous, because this property I have in Winchester is just been refurbished, it's empty. Didn't have anybody in there. So, and the same in Southampton. We've applied. Let's see, you know, because we are, you know, we're not making money on that particular business. So that's worked really well from a business rate point of view.
That's good. That's good. Whereabouts you, Tim? Have you had any grants or loans or?
Well, we certainly have to furlough staff. We normally have 17 people doing conveyancing. I think it's fair to say that all 17 weren't going to be busy in the last couple of months. So we've taken advantage of that, and that's good. I think one of my concerns is that, for example, if you can put off VAT and tax, that's all very well and good. But unlike the loans that we talked about from Jenny, which you pay back over 5 years, basically in 12 months' time, the VAT man's suddenly going to say, yes, can you pay this month's VAT? Oh, and the last year's VAT as well.
Yeah.
And if you're talking 20% of turnover, I think a lot of businesses are putting off the inevitable. They're putting off real danger. And what you won't want in a year where perhaps you have problems to come the next few months, because this is not over and there are going to be implications for months and months, is suddenly in a year's time you get this whacking great tax bill. And I think sometimes people are simply putting off the inevitable. So although, yes, it's good on the face of it, can you pay it in the long term? Are you storing up even greater problems? And you're probably better off with a stable loan which lasted for 5 years and you know what you're going to pay back. But otherwise, I think sometimes these VAT delays can sometimes be more dangerous than they actually are.
Yeah.
Agree.
That's a good point. And just to echo that point, I think in terms of what people are doing is deferring VAT, taking this bounce back loan, which is capital repayment. We can't forget that. We could be facing a double bubble whereby people are taking these loans and spending the money, thinking that they're going to grow their business or doing it for other reasons. But as you say, Tim, come next year, they've got the VAT, they've got the loans to pay back, and business still may not have recovered. And we may have bigger VAT bills to pay, plus corporation tax may go up, income tax, whatever else. We could find ourselves in a financial recession 12, 18 months from now. What's your thoughts on that?
I think that's a real risk. I don't think we're going to be out of this tomorrow. It's going to have long-term implications. We're going to have to, the government's going to have to pay huge money back, and there are only three ways of doing that. Either they borrow more, or they cut tax, or they increase taxes, or they cut expenditure. So that's going to hit business, and many businesses won't be looking for as many things to sell. You know, perhaps if a chain, they're dependent on people further up the chain. We were talking today about aeronautical firms who I think are struggling. It's bad enough for the big companies, but if you're 3 or 4 down the chain, there's no work, and there may be no work for a year. So I think there are real problems taking the money now, but actually not seriously thinking about what's going to happen in a year's time. It won't be over. There may be serious problems, and therefore I think businesses need to be cautious rather than perhaps gung-ho about taking what appears to be free money, but it'd have to be paid back.
I like that answer, and as a result of that answer, I am going to take away that -1 point I gave you earlier. So well done for that. Equally, someone has been asking for contact details for the expert panel. After this video has been done, it will be processed. I will be providing in the details of this video all of the contact details for the panel members that you could reach out and get onto that. But make sure you press that like button on this video to show your appreciation for the expert panel members that we're going through here tonight. One question for you, moving on to Teresa, if you don't mind. Universal credit, rather sensitive subject, I suppose, but if someone happens to die in one of your properties and they was on universal credit, whose responsibility is it to tell the local authority?
Simon, can I just go back to that previous question that you asked as well before I answer this one? Is that all right?
You're bossing me about, Teresa, so you may as well.
I've just got a desire. I've got to talk about the grants that are available. So on a for the self-employment grant that was available, because I've applied for that I think it was like last week, because initially the government said that self-employed people didn't have to do anything. They would just access their tax returns, and then they would contact you and let you know if you were eligible. But they kind of changed the goalposts on that. And then they just basically said last week, the portal is open for self-employed people to apply, you know, if they're eligible. So just to let anybody know that if you haven't received an email, go on to the Gov portal, and it's really straightforward. You just enter your national insurance number and they will let you know if you're eligible and for what amount. And obviously you have to state that you have been affected by COVID. But it seems to be quite straightforward process, but I'm not sure when the payments actually come in. So
yeah, that's a good point. And before you answer that next point, if you don't mind, but anyone listening to this video that has either furloughed employees but not sure how to calculate the furlough grant funding, there is a video on this YouTube channel which allows you to download the spreadsheet for furlough. I've also done another calculation spreadsheet for the Self-Employed Income Support Scheme. What a mouthful that is. Who thought of that one? And you can download that from Thursday, because that comes live on Thursday from a video perspective, and it will have the spreadsheet download for you to make that claim directly into HMRC. So apologies for that, Teresa. Continue from the secondary question.
So yeah, so that question about universal credit, and if the person passes on, during the tenancy, this is where it's important at the start of a tenancy to get information from your tenant. So if you've got emergency contact details, if you've got the national insurance number, you can deal with this situation more easily. So if the person has passed on, then you would, if you've got the emergency contact details, you would contact them, because it is for the executor to take responsibility and to inform all the authorities with regard to this. But if you haven't got those details, but you have got the national insurance number, then you can contact the government, the DWP yourself, and you can inform them of that situation. But if you haven't got any of the details, I would just recommend just going through to the Department of Work and Pensions just to let them know of the situation. But hopefully you have got emergency contact details.
Okay, good. And
would it be okay if I jumped in?
You're brilliant. Yes, please do.
If you end up taking or receiving universal credit, the housing benefit part of that, as a landlord, knowing that your tenant has died or is not liable to have that housing benefit claim, they will make the deduction back from the landlord, because it is to the person that it was paid to. So if you're getting a direct payment of a housing benefit to yourself as the landlord, and you knowingly are taking that payment when you shouldn't be, or if the tenant has been fraudulent and hasn't told housing benefit that the circumstances have changed and it is still being paid to you as the landlord, they will take it back from you, the landlord, not the tenant. So be aware. Make sure if you do know that they've died or their circumstances changed, that you notify them as well. There's no harm in them being told more than once.
And Simon, just following on a very similar subject, but if you're a couple, husband and wife, civil partners, and you're investing in property together, but one person only goes on the mortgage, would you agree with me that there is a level of risk now? Because if one person gets this COVID-19, sadly passes away, the remaining spouse, don't they have to go for a mortgage application to continue that property on?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, without doubt. Of course, and you'll know as well, Simon, in terms of the tax perspective, there's no reason. In fact, there are various advantages to having both people on the ownership details and title documents, so that you can spread the tax liability sometimes disproportionately to the person who's got a lower rate tax perspective. But yeah, in terms of it creates all sorts of problems, all sorts of. Hang on, I've lost the video feed there, guys.
No, you're still there. You're still there.
Oh, good. Right. Well, glad you can see me. I can't see any of you, though. Who are you back? Yeah. So, yeah, definitely, it makes sense to have both people on the application, whether that's in your own names or a limited company. If only one person wants to be responsible, you could have one director but two shareholders. So the couple are both shareholders, but one director, so that the directorship then handles the day-to-day running of the business, and perhaps the spouse who feels perhaps too much pressure to be part of the day-to-day business, they can just remain as shareholder. They'd still go on the application as long as they own more than 25% share of the company.
Tim, just a following on suit, which Michael from the YouTube listening panel has asked the question, estate planning anyone? Are you seeing an uptake in terms of people now freaking out because they've realized they've not got a will in place, or they're not sure where the assets are going to the children? Are you seeing anything like that?
There was a very clear trend. As soon as the whole COVID-19 started breaking, as soon as people became concerned, we had a huge uptake on wills. The number of wills we're having done went up massively. And then actually, equally, they fell off a cliff, and that's been replaced by probate. So I think the people who were really, really worried all got it done in the first few weeks. And very sadly now, people are dying more. So as a result, we're getting probably 3 or 4 times the amount of probate. It's been a massive increase. But wills has actually died off. It's quite surprising. I thought that would continue, but actually it hasn't done. So yeah, big leap up, but then it's gone off again.
Okay.
And the same other similar things. Often you get a lasting power of attorney, and again, estate planning. Again, that's all gone very much by the by. It's pure probate in my private client team now.
Wow. I saw Paul put his hand up. I'm not sure if he's got to confess something to the expert panel or if he's going to answer a question.
I was going to answer the question. I was going to mention lasting power of attorneys. If as a landlord, or especially if you've got a portfolio, you must get lasting power of attorney on your financial side and even on your health side, because if anything does happen to you and you can't sign checks or instruct mandates, or if your bank account's frozen, your mortgages will be the first thing to be stopped and you'll be in trouble. So sort an LPA out, speak to your legal advisor or your tax advisor.
Yeah. No, very good point. And I can see that Tim's just disappeared. Oh, he's back again as well.
Yeah. Can I just add one thing on there? Lasting powers of attorney is very useful, but actually there's something that no one seems to know about, and that's the general power of attorney. In very short, lasting powers of attorney are when you are physically or mentally incapable. If something happens to you and then it can be taken over. But actually, with COVID, it may well be that, say, you're hospitalized or briefly you have to self-isolate. So actually, you're not losing capacity, which is when the lasting power of attorney comes in. You simply need someone to sign documents in the short term. And that's where the not very well-known general power of attorney comes in. Much simpler, much safer, and really every business should have a general power of attorney, also a lasting power of attorney, but they're quite different. And most people seem to know about lasting powers of attorney, but virtually no one ever hears the much simpler, more basic general power.
Which makes a lot of sense, because Louise did get last power of attorney on me because I was incapable. So we'll leave it there from her views. Here's one for you, but that came out from Zitso, who says TMW downvalued one of their properties as it's going through a mortgage property. So 30% down value. If you're in that situation where a mortgage company just decides, well, you know what, we're going to devalue it so much that, well, it's impossible to buy the property, what do you do?
Well, if you haven't done an exchange with delayed completion, I guess you'd walk away, really. A 30% down valuation suggests that something very seriously was wrong in the first place. Yeah, it's such a huge amount of difference between, from your perspective or your perceived, perspective on the marketplace, the valuer's perspective on the marketplace. If this person feels that the valuer that went out was massively off the pace, and my goodness, how a valuer could be that far off the pace is hard to understand. Then potentially it's worth speaking to a local surveyor just to see what their second opinion might be, and then maybe trying to work out who they are on panel for in terms of other lenders to see if it's possible to rescue a deal. But I'd still come back to my first comment. If it's been downvalued by 30%, something's a bit wrong, I think.
Very good question. I've got one for you, Jenny. Now you're back. In terms of a letting agent and working on HMOs, I've had mixed reviews being told to me by clients that saying, if I've got a single let property, a letting agent might be good at that, but a HMO they're not so good at. And then there's a question over fees. What's your, I mean, from your agency perspective, you clearly do help people with HMOs, but is it a very different marketplace for letting agents, and should landlords be wary of that?
It's a very different marketplace. Let's take single lets. Often, depending on the properties, but often they get a tenant that will go into a single let, and if it's a family, for instance, they might be in there for 10 years. they've got the kids at school, they don't want to move particularly, as long as you look after them, you know, they tend to stay. An HMO is really transient. You probably get people in there from 6 to 18 months max. They rarely stay much longer than that because they're ready to move up the ladder, if you like. So you're having a big changeover of people. But the big difference is not only you're managing the property, you're managing the personalities of the tenants. And it's about getting a good fit with tenants. And they might be a really good fit to start with, and then something happens in somebody's life and they become grumpy for some reason or other. They might be ill, they might have lost their job, they might have a relationship breakdown. And because of that, perhaps they're not as friendly in the house as they used to be, and it starts to cause upset. You've got to act almost like a family in an HMO. Some of the things that crop up are people borrowing each other's milk. You know, it's about managing the tenants, and you have to be on it all of the time. There's also a lot more wear and tear on the property, so you've got to be on the maintenance a lot more as well. So it's a much bigger job. It's like having 5 tenancies in the same house. Well, it's often that's what it is. So it's 5 times the work, but more. It's exponentially more than that, than a single let. Plus, you've got to be right on the ball with it. Quick, you've got to act quickly. And when you're going in to do things, you've got to notify the whole household, and you've got to make sure that you're not upsetting anybody in the house by perhaps having the electric turned off for a while whilst you need to do this particular repair, or the drainage, or whatever it is. So it's a lot more involved from a management point of view, very much more hands-on.
Bronwyn, obviously you work with Jenny. What's from your perspective, HMOs, are they a bit of a nightmare compared to single let properties, and is it just a relief to hand it over to someone else?
Well, I think my experience has been very much how do you find somebody that really understands this stuff, that is empathetic, that can work with people, and that's the big difference. And that took me a little while before I found Jenny. I tried different agents. I haven't tried a high street agent, but I know people that use high street agents, and they just don't have the time or the effort. You know, they can't react as quickly. So it's always been my policy to find somebody who's also an investor, who also understands this sort of thing, is doing it themselves, has their own HMOs potentially, and they add yours to theirs. But be very, very careful, because you've got to have somebody who understands agency agreements and the legal side of it. And that's really very much where Jenny has come to the fore, you know, of getting the right agreements in place. And if something goes wrong, knowing what to do next. So yeah, you've got to shop around. And if you don't get the right service, find somebody else, use the networks, talk to other people. So yeah. Definitely worth her weight in gold.
Thank you, Bronwyn. I'm just going to come back in on the high street agent side of things. My belief is that the reason the high street agents are not particularly good at HMOs is because they're not business owners. You're dealing with a member of staff who are not really invested in what they're doing as a general rule. And they've got a lot more rules and regulations coming down the corporate line that doesn't allow them to be sufficiently flexible to work in an HMO environment. So I think if you're looking for an HMO manager, you want to be looking for an independent letting agent. And as Bronwyn says, someone who already has their own, that they can understand the process.
It's an interesting one. I want to go on to another particular subject. And anyone listening, by the way, we decided to extend our sessions till 8:30. So we will be doing a summary. We'll be going a whip round, because last 2 weeks, we didn't do a whip round through everyone in terms of closing comments. So this one, I'm keen to do that. And because I'm still looking for that phone call from the Beeb, I will be professional in closing this call out today. But let's do the litmus test paper question. I'm going to talk about rent to rents, whereby you've taken a single let property, so you did a rent to rent, and then you converted it into a holiday let. Let's discuss that. Simon, what's your thoughts around this whole subject?
To be fair, there's a lot of people that I think have kind of got into that area of the market space by trying that. certainly it's a way of, or it was a way of getting into it without putting much cash into it. Typically, the challenges were that the then landlord either didn't know that they need to inform their lender that the type of tenant had changed, and generally that would almost certainly require a change of mortgage. And if I'm not mistaken, typically it's not massively easy to then insure a property that's not correctly financed for the end tenant type. So do it. It's a great way of doing it, but just be cautious. There are some shortcuts that shouldn't necessarily be taken and can potentially wipe your business out if something untoward or particularly disastrous happens and you aren't correctly insured.
Okay. I am going to go to Bronwyn and Paul in a second, but I'm really interested in your views, Tim. From a legal perspective, someone's obviously taking a property on as a single let, may or may not be saying what they're going to be using it for, then all of a sudden it's on Airbnb. Any legal issues?
Well, I think the biggest worry for me was always the insurance point of view. Let's face it, insurance policies, if they can get out of paying a claim, they always will. And I think there's going to be pretty more and more of this. All that has to happen is a particularly nasty fine, then I think the whole thing becomes a national scandal. So I think people have to be extremely careful. They have actually got the correct paperwork in place. They've got the authorization. They're able to got the approval of the lender. Any lease, for example, the lease may say that they're not allowed to do it, because any of these excuses, I think, will allow the insurers to run ring roads around them and simply refuse to pay a claim. And particularly if there's a person, perhaps a fatality involved, which happens from time to time, then it's just disaster all around.
Interesting. Bronwyn, what's your thoughts?
Make sure you get all your paperwork right. It's the same old story, and can't cut corners. Get your paperwork right. Don't take chances.
Good, very good points. Bronwyn.
Yeah, there were a lot of people out there teaching people how to do rent to serviced accommodation, and a lot of cheap courses. Oh, you don't have any money to invest, well, do this because you don't need any money. And it's just that in itself is a scandal, because negotiating when you've got no experience and no knowledge about rental led a lot of people to get their fingers burnt. And not least, if they're going to be renting a flat and then they create it into serviced accommodation, definitely quite often that lease doesn't allow that. So residents then complain, and then the freeholder says, no, this isn't allowed. And then they have to renege on that whole contract. Plus, it's really hard to make money in that area, because you've got to be really good at negotiating. So I think, it's got a bad name because, people are not successful in that, but people try and make money by selling courses. I won't even start on that game. There's, I think definitely it's just not worth the risk. If somebody dies, in terms of insurance, crazy, why would you ever take that risk? And then if you get taken to court, or, once you've got a bad credit file, you can't get that back. So it's just not worth it.
Good point. Paul, over to you.
Yeah, I can only repeat what Simon Hodgson said, which is insurance. Highly important to make sure you got the right insurance for the right products of what you're letting out at. So whether that be service accommodation or even HMOs, there's a lot of people who've got rent to HMO and they've got no experience. They've not been taught correctly. They don't have the basic precautions such as fire doors, such as fire alarm systems, such as interlinked smoke alarms. It's all required, certainly on HMOs, and I would suggest even on service accommodation, especially if you're letting to contractors. You may be in the service accommodation market and therefore short-term letting, but you've still got to protect your tenants. You've got to be able to sleep at night. So please make sure you do instruct your the landlord who you're renting from to ensure that he knows what you're doing and you've got the proper insurance cover. Otherwise, it's going to come up and bite you or the landlord or both of you badly.
So it's now that time where I'm going to ask you yet again to give us a like on this channel, I can see that we've got 15 likes. We can also see there's 66 of you watching this video. So it'd be great if we can hit that 2025 number. I am also going to do the slopey shoulders act now, and I'm going to do my closing comment first, so then I can just mute for myself and just watch everyone else close out the session. We'll leave Bronwyn to the last, to the best to last, I should say, and we will leave her to do that. But from my perspective, there are a lot of changes coming afoot. I certainly think there are lots of opportunities for you to make money, but I do think, and I do stress, make sure you have a buddy system in place, because there are uncertain times. Don't make a decision on your own. Talk it through with someone that you respect. Please don't ask your dog. They are just going to be barking mad. Not a very good idea. Make sure they are sane. Don't ask your grandma. Equally, she's barking mad. So really, we do need to speak to people that are provide common sense, but also you can look up to as well, whether that's a professional advisor or someone that you admire in the marketplace. So that's me. Good evening. So I'm going to pass over, so I can mute myself finally, over to Simon Hodgson, and we'll be there for another 15 minutes.
Thanks, Simon. Oh, brilliant. Yeah, just really wanted to wrap up. Well, yeah, it's great that the lockdown is being eased. As mentioned, the surveyors I've spoken to have been pretty positive in how they're seeing the marketplace. I think we just need to be a little bit careful. Do not become a motivated buyer and get caught up with potentially offering too much on a property, thinking that the market hasn't dipped. The potential for the market to dip still is there. In fact, there could be a small, if you like, mini client growth of the market before we then actually see the proper effects of what the lockdown has done to the economy, then have an adverse effect on the property market. So really do be careful. If you're buying now, make sure that you have got proper discount, genuine discount on the property that you're buying, so that your numbers stack up. And don't forget, if you're working on something that you are looking to recycle your cash and bring your cash back out, the reduction in property prices that you might factor into your numbers need to be on the end value, not the purchase price, because you might be buying something at 300,000, let's say, spending 100 and it's worth 500,000. 5% of 500,000, a whole lot different to 5% of 300,000, and can really make the difference in your numbers working or not working. That's it for me. Thank you.
Are you passing on to Simon?
I think I'm going to pass on to Paul.
Thanks, Simon. Appreciate you didn't take 15 minutes and use up everybody else's time. Thanks. Thank you for listening, everyone. Don't forget, at LMPG, we're still looking for landlords who are feeling the pinch and that you've tried all the other ways to save money, yet still want to grow your business. So what's easier for you, to allow spending to continue to spiral uncontrolled, or join LMPG and learn how to save money on your property business? Our suppliers are open for business, and always check with us or check with the office if you've got a query or if you need some support as regards issues with the supplier. So we look forward to your calls later on this week. Over to Tim.
With regard to the perennial question about when is the right time to buy, I can only go back on what I think has been fairly standard advice in previous recessions, and that's don't rush in. Wait and see. You need to judge when the actual market is dipped. Now, we don't know whether it will, but I think it's quite likely to dip, and there will be bargains. But I think at the moment, everybody suddenly thinks they're there on day one. They're probably not. A bargain is always a bargain. So if you found something that's particularly good value or you can add value to, that's great. But my recommendation is, if you haven't got a genuine bargain that you can really add value to, wait, because there are going to be some bargains. How big, I don't know. How often, I don't know. How many, I don't know. But there will be some. And so the trick then is to actually wait until the market has hit rock bottom. And I'm absolutely convinced it hasn't done that yet.
Handing over to on mute. That's brilliant. Okay, let's go over to Jenny.
Yeah, so I agree with what's going on that the others have said with the property prices, and I think there are definitely going to be some opportunities out there that we, keep yourself liquid so that you can quickly go for these bargains that might be out there, because moving fast is probably the key thing having a good mortgage broker on site, Simon, is very important because they need to move fast for you as well. From a lettings point of view, it picked up immediately as soon as lockdown was slightly released. All of a sudden, the demand picked up. The demand for viewings, new properties came onto our books as well, and so it's very buoyant. People want to move. They've been penned up for quite a long time, so I think we're going to see quite a lot more rooms on the market, probably more small properties on the market for rental, and from a lettings point of view, I think we're going to be quite busy, which is great news. And I'm going to hand over to Teresa.
Thank you, Jenny. My closing remark would be it's more important now more than ever to be kept informed as to what legislation changes are happening with government. The whole possession landscape is going to be changing. So currently we can't gain possession, but they're adding in pre-action protocols, for example, as another thing to put in for landlords to do to gain back possession. So it's just important that you keep up to date. So the NRLA are doing that. And also we are lobbying hard to get council tax clarification, or help with council tax for those void or vacant properties. We're looking to get extensions on gas safety certificates and the mandatory electrical certificates. So we're lobbying hard to make things a bit easier for landlords out there. So yeah, just keep up to date, guys. I forgot to mention as well, you can get a discounted membership through myself, and I'm sure that Simon will add that on to the bottom of the YouTube video if you want to get in touch. Oh yeah, and handing over, I forgot, oh, Bronwyn.
Oh, it's me. Hi, everybody. Right. So the key summary for me is look at the experts that we've got in this panel. How wonderful is that? That's something I very much advocate, is working with the best people you can who have got knowledge. So it's all very well learning about property investing, but you do need to have people on hand to ask. There's no point in being an expert in tax and learning about tax if you can talk to someone else who knows that. So what a great example tonight. Thank you, everybody. It's great, all these people I work with and support and help me with my property investing. So my final summary really is, if you want to understand what the opportunities are going to be coming out of lockdown, because there will be lots of different opportunities in different strategy areas, then I would say start learning now. Whether you've already got some experience, contact me, work with other people, start getting that education so that you're ready to move. And that really goes right back to can you borrow money? Have you got finance? Have you got liquid funds? Are you ready to make an offer? And I know people are doing that already. So don't panic, but get learning. So, and thank you, Simon. Fantastic hosting as ever. Over to you.
Just to finalize that, a couple of things actually. If anyone's been looking in my forehead thinking there's a scar on there, and that is because my 5-year-old son, Hugo, attempted to make me look like Harry Potter, failed, tried the Zorro look instead, failed again, and just thought he'd just slash my head instead. So, now I've always wanted 2 kids. Now I've got 1. I don't want any. So that's the closing component. We look forward to seeing you on Monday, the 1st of June. If your invites have not been received, do make sure that you can plug in even tonight on our Acuity scheduling and book in for the first Monday of every month, which is obviously the 1st of June at 7 p.m. So we look forward to seeing you then. Until then, stay safe, stay at home, and go to work.
Cheers. Well
Good
done.
evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Good evening. Bye.